The first speaker is Johannes Richter from Remedy. Johannes, are you ready? Come on stage, please. Here you go.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Almost forgot this one. This is so TED. Amazing. Yeah, thanks for having me here. I will be talking about our procedural workflows for Control, the foundation. Brief introduction, really short. Johannes Richter, that's me. I'm head of VFX at Remedy. I used to work in film, started moving into games a couple of years ago, and now I'm looking at after the VFX and tech art team at Remedy across all of our projects. And what I will be talking about today is a bit introduction, what is Control, the foundation, then the ideas and concepts that we had in mind when making this, how we designed the systems, how we did the visual development, some production examples, and then Houdini use and some learnings that we took from that. So what's Control? Again, super short, some people might have played it before. It's Jesse Faden in the oldest house fighting a supernatural threat. And I can only reference a talk I did a few years back about how we did the procedural destruction in Control, so maybe have a look at that if you're interested in those aspects. Control the Foundation is the first paid DLC for Control, and again, Jesse's on a mission to the Foundation, which is kind of the basement of the oldest house, to avert another threat. And the challenge, as always, is there are great ambitions. You want to do the best you can. There's supposed to be a new location for the players, new abilities to play with, new fun gameplay, but also it had to fit into an existing game. There was a log tech. There was no one going in implementing new mechanics there or new game features of the bigger kind. We had a rather small team of 25 people max, I think. We had only 4 months to get it done, and it was kind of overlapping a bit with a free expansion that we did for Control, the expedition. So that was all a bit tight. So ideas and concepts, how does this work? We sat together in a room, not all 25, maybe 10 of us, and we came up with what do we want this to be. And we quite quickly circled around the duality of growing and destroying something. And it had to be limited to the foundation because we didn't want to, or we couldn't, add everything also to the main game because that's a pretty big world to fill or house to fill. We wanted some kind of crystalline material because it's kind of cool looking. And with that, I started just doing some tests, some random, okay, open Houdini, do some stuff. So shape crystal, early exploration, lots of varying things just to get an idea of what they could even be and have something to look at and talk about, which usually makes it much easier to talk about it because you have sort of some seed points. Yeah, exploration on like what could we use this for in terms of combat or traversal or yeah, just different type of doors or something, and other fun stuff. And some of it we abandoned, and some of it made it actually into the game. So we were closing in on our goals. We knew what we wanted the whole crystal stuff to be used for. So something the player learns to create and destroy in separate stages as part of the game to allow some kind of Metroidvania-style exploration. So you get to a place where you can't go through yet because you can't destroy the stuff, or you can't grow it to jump on and continue, but you can come back later once you've gained that ability. Power fantasy, of course, we want the player who has learned to fly, who has learned to like launch furniture at enemies. We wanted them to feel empowered, that it's kind of meaningful what they have gained of an ability. And a part of traversal, player guidance, and player gating. So it was sort of like the ultimate, let's make this thing do everything that the game has to offer. So part of combat, part of puzzles, we later called them rituals, and had to be sort of environmentally present because it wasn't supposed to be like it was sort of naturally grown. That's what it meant to be, as it's just the material as part of the foundation. And then, excuse the frame rate, that's just me being terrible at capturing things, but that was the very, very first test in a test level, fully scripted with our internal scripting language. And just to show like, okay, you can grow something, you can kind of destroy it. That one still comes in stages, just to sort of elaborate a bit on what would it even mean if you have to implement that. Based on that, we sort of designed the system. So the flow of every crystal in the game is there's something on the wall, there's something on it that you can interact with, and then there's an animation playing, it's growing, there's a crystal coming out. At some point it goes a bit like, meaning, oh, I'm about to break again, and then it breaks. And that is the first test of implementing that. You see, it's not even having an actual button you can push to do it. You have to shoot the crystal and then it starts growing because there were no events for that yet. just to see could it be useful, and also seeing some of the challenges. Stuff needs to be around for longer so you don't fall off and those kind of things. Crystal comes in two flavors. It can grow, what we've just seen, so you pull on it, it comes out, you can stand on it, continue jumping, and then it breaks at some point, and then it goes the other way around. Crystal is already grown, you can sort of shoot it, it gets cracks, shoot it more, it breaks, then it's gone, and after a while it grows back. So these are the two flavors, and every kind of crystal in the game is following one of those two things. The procedural flow behind it, because it was really just me making them all, I wanted to be able to draw sort of the base shape. I wanted to be able to give like a profile from the top down and from the side view, and based on that, make a mesh. And well, that was an FBX, as terrible as FBX is. And then it made more, because we needed the thing that's actually stuck on the wall before the animation plays. And then there's another mesh in there that just draws the outline that you can select when you pull on it. It's a bit of more of a technicality, but that had to be made. It had to make the animation. It had to make the breakable setup, which is very much what we did destruction-wise if it would be a piece of furniture. The only addition there is that the metadata was created procedurally now, or dynamically, so we didn't have to do this by hand. The actual breaking state is just a different material, so nothing complicated there. And that got plopped into two prefabs. We do also have prefabs in our engine. And then there was a grow version and a destroy version, depending on which way around you sort of start setting it up. And that is what level designers could put into the level. And important learnings already, make sure you fit the metrics. Metrics is sort of like, how high can the player jump? How far do you walk when you do one step? Those kind of things. Or how much can you see around the feet of the player? It's a third-person game, so the camera is somewhere here, and you don't often see the feet, for example. So the platforms need to be a bit larger, because it's really annoying if you can't see where you're stepping, and then you fall off all the time. Growth speed matters, as you've seen. If it doesn't come out fast enough, or too slow, or too fast, you just sort of don't match the expectation of like, I now want to jump on this, and then it isn't there yet, and then you just fall, and you go like, that kind of sucks. So, and then, yeah, the breaking state is quite important, because if you stand on it, you need to know how long you can still stand on it before you have to move. So if it starts breaking, it needs to be clearly communicated. Yeah, so these are just some pictures of videos of different animation tests that we did. Lots of different animation tests. We decided to go for rigid body animation only. We didn't have a proper pipeline workflow set up to actually do skin stuff, and that was in times before kin effects, which I would have loved to use back then. We chose one of them, actually, don't know which one right now. Yeah, but we also weren't sure, is that really what we want to do? And we went back a bit, what is other stuff? What could we do? And that's really spending a couple of hours just like, okay, what other things could that crystal stuff be? What if it's more organic, for example, or like some kind of, you know, SDF sort of scenario. But that was really just to calm our nerves. We're like, hey, yeah, no, let's not go there, because there are too many questions that come out of that. So the ball's rolling. Level design and environments were already working on their levels. So we're like, okay, we probably have to really, you know, pull a finger and really get going on this. Because this is what it looked like. They placed those kind of crystals in the world. They used them for traversal, or for, you know, you could shoot them. You could do the entire game flow and mission design and even puzzle design around it. And as you can see, actually, there's, of course, they were not done yet. So, but that shows that's what was already ongoing. And at that point, we're like, okay, maybe we kind of also need to think about how are those crystals actually going to look like at the end. It seems a bit counterintuitive, because why wouldn't you just think about that early? But our goal was we need to unlock the environment team and the level design team to actually plan the missions and build the whole world. They couldn't just wait for us to figure out what color it's going to be in the end. So they had to be unlocked. So we had to determine, you know, the speeds and the sizes and all those kind of things, because they can then just go on, make all the world, and then we can come in after. So at this point in time was the best, if even very, very brief moment where we could actually work just on the look, because no one was waiting for us. And then we went back to like some old reference stuff that we had. There's Bismuth, it's an awesome material, it looks really fantastic, and I've seen in many references for effects I had to do in my career. And it's very control, all those square shapes and, you know, those repetitive things. It's very like brutalesque somehow. We liked it, but then didn't go for it, because it didn't really work out that well. And the other one, I've just put it here, that's why everything was yellow in the beginning, because that was one of the pictures that we had. But we thought that's a bit too World of Warcraft, so we had to do something about it. We got Oliver involved, who's an amazing concept artist who works at Remedy, who just started shaping up some things. How could they look like? And he also was actually able to paint over levels that have already been started to be built. And that's how that looked like, just different things to try out. And yeah, that quite quickly we moved into the 3D realm, see how that actually plays with the stuff that we've already made. So here a couple of stages of this. Jesse standing on a crystal. It's quite, if you see it this way, they look massive, but if you're actually just playing, they don't actually feel that big. So there's always a bit of a size trickery going on. Yeah, and then just refine at some of things, make sure they kind of blend into the walls a bit better, sleeve meshes and stuff, and then looking at animation and some particle effects and those kind of things that were quite important. And you'll see here, that's the sort of breaking state early, because it didn't spawn particles and stuff. It's not very visible. But, yeah, there's some challenges that came out of that. So the level designers were playing, and at some point they're like, we kind of have a problem here. Because what happens if you have an enemy who just walks right into the way? And if you consider the crystal being a physics object that pushes things, and the enemy being a ragdoll, there's some crazy rocket moments that happen when things just start exploding. So what happens if something's in the way, and how do we push things? And that really then brought us out of scripting land. We had custom gameplay code, so we had a gameplay coder on the team who just implemented all of the things that were needed: player interaction, timing and feel. There's different states, like a state machine for the crystal, but also how do enemies interact with them? To make sure, for example, we have those spikes that come out of the ground that enemies sort of conveniently always kind of walk over them, so you can spike them. Because otherwise, if you just hope they do, they never actually do. That's just a bit annoying. Yeah, game editor hooks, how do you actually put those things together, and all the nasty fringe cases that can occur with collisions and navigation and all those things. Yeah, and it ended up being something like this. We have a few puzzles in the game where the crystal needs to push boxes that fall somewhere, those energy cubes. And it did work. So by that time, we're fully in production. So we had to provide all the building blocks for level design, while we continued iterating a bit on the look and feel. So particle effects for the combat feel, just make it feel nice when you pull it out of the wall. Develop some shader solution to make the material stand out a bit more, to not just be green rock. And then also explore options for that ritual that we were trying to implement. That's how that looked like. We settled on, I think it was just below 30 different elements of crystal there. And I had a big test level, and that's where I set them all up. And they were all based on the initial metrics that the level designers used already all over the place. So in the end, I just had to go in and swap them out. Just go in and swap them out. Yeah, I've got quite a few different videos. You can kind of see in the background all the different stuff that was needed for the different astral plane areas, but these are the rituals already back there. And everything sort of had to be tested, and does it work, and does it have all the moving parts, and did nothing borg out exporting it, etc. And another one, walls, yeah, so crystals used for gating, always kind of the same principle that happened there. Then to the shader development, at that point we didn't really have super awesome tech to do shader stuff that had a lot to do with the whole ray tracing scenario. So whenever you do something with materials, you then also need to do the stuff for the ray tracing land. So we were quite conservative to just go in and like, yeah, let's whip up another shader to do stuff, because that needed some special care and maintenance there we didn't have the bandwidth for. So, but yeah, so we thought on, can we have something on the inside to make them feel like something's happening there? And that was a very early test, and that's sort of something we in the end settled on. It's sort of a fake parallax something, really. Magic numbers, sample texture stuff happening on the inside. Literally that. I mean, anyone who's built shader networks, even in Unreal or something, will know how that works. You start with precision, and then you go like, yeah, but if I multiply it by 5, it's so much better. So you do, 5.2 actually. Then we talked about rituals, and that was quite a challenge, because they became quite elemental in the narrative. So it has to do with the board and the oldest house and the former, and like things that you need to bring back in order. And we settled on the player having to do 4 as part of the game, but because you could pick either destroy or grow first, so we had to do 2 rituals for grow, 2 for destroy, and then 2 for both together. The player actually only sees the 4, depending on what you do first. So they had to be somewhat generic, because we couldn't custom tailor them for weeks. We really didn't have the time for that, so they had to somehow work with the existing mechanics. And the thought really was, okay, you have a pile of crystal stuff, you can grow things, you can shoot a couple of other things, and then it needs to be a nice shape. So the idea was like, okay, let's make a ball, let's make a sphere as a geometric shape to sort of like bring order into the chaos kind of metaphor in there. And yeah, that was super early actually when we tested this. And that's then how that ended up sort of in the game. I think that's one of the early grow ones. Probably this is the very first, so it's a bit simple actually. You just fly around and you have to pull the different crystal things out, and I'm apparently pretty bad at it. Yeah, then it's sort of, yeah, there's no finishing animation on this here, but that shows roughly what it was supposed to be. So it was a traversal exercise. How do you do this? Shoot the things and grow the things in the right time at the right angle when you have to sort of jump and fly around it. Yeah, some people are considerably better than others at it, and I'm really bad. So yeah, that's how that looked like. That's another one, destroy in just a Houdini turntable thing. And then that's the same thing then in game. So you have those spikes that you have to shoot away, so you get to the holes underneath to grow some stuff out and those things. So how did we use Houdini in this? So, well, Houdini was the procedural backend for all the crystal creation, and it was a bunch of HDAs that I made to turn the guide geometry initial setup into the actual crystal shapes. And then that was used for generating all of the things that were needed. I think it was 7 or 8 different assets per crystal. For the rituals, each ritual had like 10 different crystal things, so you ended up having like 70 files or 70 things to handle per ritual, and stuff can go wrong. But what we did have, luckily, is, and I talked about it in the other talk, that we didn't have it back then, and I complained. So now we had metadata exports, so I could actually set the physics properties of everything in a node somewhere in Houdini, and I didn't have to do this by hand afterwards, so that was really helpful. It wasn't super automated, so it was build, run, and modified sort of manually per item, as in I changed the HDA, and then I do have to still go in and click the button again and make sure it actually works, because there's always something going wrong if you do bools or if you do VDB stuff, this stuff that should work, but then doesn't. So it was riding the thin line of trying to make the perfect tool that does the great, the crystals, but not spending too much time trying to over-engineer for the fringe cases. So in the end, it was quite pragmatic, because we had a finite amount. At some point, level then stopped asking for more. So I'm like, okay, this seems to be all of them, and then you sort of could work through this because we had to get it done, and time was ticking, and there's Christmas in between, stuff like that. Yeah, that was one too quick. That's how this looked in Houdini. I didn't do, doesn't play back. Didn't do any fancy Python states and stuff, because it was me using it. So I go in, select a curve, change the curve, and things move and do stuff. If there would have been other artists involved that would have to use this environment, artists and level designers, then of course it would have to have a more flashy interface. In this case, it wasn't needed. I mean, this is just air capture that I did back then to showcase the different controls that I have for the latching points on those astral cubes. And if we let this run for a while, yeah, that's one of the destroy rituals I think you've seen before. It's not really the most exciting capture, to be honest. But at the end, I actually switched to the actual view. Here we go. Yeah, so that's how that then was previewed, so I could really know what I'm doing. And then it goes into the game, and it hot loads, so you can really just export and then start playing straight away. Another simple procedural system was, yeah, they needed a bunch of wall items with the crystal stuff on they can place around to sort of not have the interactive platforms be the only thing on the wall that that you saw that was crystal. And that was actually quite simple. And this doesn't play back, but that doesn't matter. Yeah, I can draw the lines and it changes the shape of it. So how did the whole thing go? What's the conclusion? Well, yeah, kind of well, I guess. We've created lots of content in a very short amount of time. It's a pretty complex game mechanic. And it sort of quite successfully interleaved the whole design setup and the art of it, how does it look like, but also the proceduralism of it. And it went beyond just some modeling task. It was really, how do we create procedural building blocks that then can be used in level design, and they can go, actually, I think I need another door. It's twice as big, twice as long. There's something else, takes longer to shoot, so it needs more like fingers or something, and really support sort of design processes of that nature, and not just break it down to like, how do I get some polygons stitched together. The crystals themselves proved to be quite a nice mechanism. and the visual element to just separate it from the main game because it's a paid DLC. People go, you want to offer something that is sort of fresh and new, but also kind of true to the original. And after being in this brutalist game that Control is going into the basement and it's all caves and stuff, that seemed to be actually quite a successful route. But of course, if you would have more time, we would have made more stuff. And that's always the balance. When do you stop, or how much do you dare? And it's easy to try to bite off too much, and then you kind of choke on it. And at this point, it felt just about kind of the sweet spot. It was a bit stressful towards the end, but it worked out really well. What are the learnings? Super important. Do not over-engineer. So don't make a thing that always works for all cases. Make something work 80% of the time. I guess everyone will be very familiar with that. Because you think of like a system that you want to build, and then you realize, all of those problems that could happen, but usually those problems are like 5% on the fringes. And then you spend most of your time trying to solve those, and the actual core was actually done already quite early. But don't under-engineer. Because just going in like, I can just quickly make this up because, it's just once, then it makes it a game feature that happens all the time, and then you will regret that you started sloppy 427 times afterwards, because that's how often you have to do it. So finding the right balance between the controls that you want to give yourself or someone who will use the tools and the complexity that can come out of that, and weighing that a bit against like how much effort can you actually spend on building those kind of tools is, always a thin line to ride. And what was super important and was actually quite rewarding, Remedy is quite an artisan house. So lots of people like to build and place things by hand because it's just very crafty and very detail-oriented. So having people to trust the process of like, okay, you get this really ugly-looking yellow World of Warcraft crystal thing, and trust it will look great at the end, even if you put it in your levels right now as it is. That was quite important. And from the narrative, it went like, okay, rituals, roughly, that's how they work, to gameplay, is it kind of fun to kill enemies with spikes, level design, environment art, and then even VFX and tech art, or even ourselves. It has been quite great. And in the end, it built a lot of awareness, and that is what I feel we always have to do, build more procedural awareness so people know what can even be achieved, so they dare to go there. Because often we just cut it short and say, no, I'm just going to play. It's fine, it's only like 5,000 trees, I place them by hand, it's not a big deal. Right? And which sounds really odd, but we are all coming from the knowing end. And sometimes we're not fully aware of the needs and desires on the art side, environment art side, for example, of what people really care about that often isn't captured when you just quickly scatter stuff. So where do you go from here? Well, I had to put this in. We're looking for VFX and tech artists. So go to our careers page or reach out to me in LinkedIn or just talk to me when I run around here later. I'm the guy with the shirt. And now it's time for questions. I hope I wasn't too long. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions? There's one over here.
Hi. Have you considered doing the crystal generation in the game runtime itself?
So if we have tried that? No. No.
Considered.
From the get-go, I would say that sounds like something that will really get very messy very quickly. You want to be in control. So you kind of want to be able to just play back an animation. That wasn't on purpose. Promise.
Thank you. Any other question? Bojan, were there questions online? Did you know? 2 questions. Please go ahead.
Okay. We have 2 questions online. Oh, 3 by now. One is from Jonathan Ferguson, and he's asking if you dynamically loaded and unloaded the destructible mesh data, or was it always in memory?
It's normally streamed meshes, so they get streamed in and out with the normal streaming system. It's just the mesh in the graph and the scene.
Okay, thank you. And the second question coming from Jan is, how does your tooling for level designers look like? Are they only placing geometry, or can they generate something themselves?
They are placing pre-made prefabs. The tooling that we have, the level world editor that we used for control, it has aged a little bit, and it doesn't have that kind of fancy, oh, you draw a thing and then it does something at the back of that. So we beforehand agreed on what they would need. They got the boxy version, and then that boxy version at some point upgraded to something new because it was prefabs that they just placed in the levels. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's clear. We would have loved to see some screenshots, but my guess is it's all under NDA.
No, it's more like I didn't have a capture of it, and it was really hard to get this old repo back to do the purely boring logistic issues. It wasn't a big secret. Yeah.
Thank you. And we have one question from Tim. My guess is that Tim is a producer. He's asking, how do you practically communicate with so many departments? Is it weekly meetings or something else?
We were luckily just a few people, really. I think, so we just talked. But that wouldn't scale. I mean, it's the issue of running productions that maybe have more than 20 people. Then you go like, actually, we need to write everything kind of down, and we sort of need to agree on timelines and schedules and time boxes. But because it was a DLC and we were kind of on quite a quick pace, that we had to do those things, we were just empowered to decide stuff really quickly. So we went, okay, this, A or B, okay, B, fine. And then we move. There wasn't a lot of time for deliberation and making sure that everyone had a say in it. It was really the people that had to do the stuff, did the stuff when it was needed. So it was very pragmatic and felt very good, which I guess is the bonus of working on DLCs, when a lot of the moving parts have stopped moving. Yeah.
Thank you very much for the clear answers. I hope that that answered everyone's questions. And if there are more questions in the audience, you can just raise your hand.
Thanks. I wonder, how did you involve playtesting in the whole process? Or did you not have time for that?
We do. We do have in-house QA and playtesters and in-house playtests. And then we kind of play test ourselves. So it's very easy to just run the game and try it, basically. And at some point you involve in-house people that have never tried it before, so you get sort of fresh feedback from players. And then you have external testers that come in and try. It sort of happens all the time, probably as always, never enough. But we try, because you want to make sure that you don't know how everything works because you do it every day. You kind of want to make sure that the regular player has a good experience, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Question?
Thank you. You showed us you talked about prefabs that the user are placing in the level. Could you tell me a bit more about how they looked, which control they have to?
How did the prefab look? Like the grown crystal. So when you place it, you know where it would be. It depends on which way, right? So either it's the one that's already there, then while you see what it is, and then you have to kind of imagine once it breaks how much is left, which is usually just the attachment based on the wall. And if you place it for a growth crystal, then you kind of have to remember that this is one that isn't there until you pull on it, but you would see the full shape of it, because you need to kind of know the maximum extent of their size when you place them. So, and then also there wasn't like that much fancy sort of gizmo kind of control that we have to give people a different view or something, or let it try. In the end, you place it, and then you can quite quickly test it in game as well. So that was fairly quick to do, yeah.
Do you mean there was a preview generated, so you can test it right away, or does this back and forth with you to generate the actual look of the mesh? Was I recorded? Yeah.
Sorry, can you just repeat that? It was very quiet.
So, okay. Do you mean there was a preview of the results before Houdini actually generated the mesh, or when you placed it?
Sort of what you see is what you get. I mean, you've seen it. Like I push the thing, and then it goes. This is what it looks like. Back then, I didn't have sort of a decent shader support, so we can actually see the materials as well, but you could see the shapes quite straight away. It took a couple of seconds to generate. That's why I did a lot of things with the polywire, but close enough, really.
Okay, so Houdini was integrated into the engine, right?
No.
So you
no,
can-
no, no. It's I built this in Houdini. I can see it in Houdini. I hit save, and it literally hot loads in the running game. So you can actually just see it there if you really need to. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Cool. Well, thank you very much. Oh.
Okay, one final question from Ivan. I will not introduce everyone because I don't know everyone.
Thank you for the introduction. Yeah, I was just wondering if what was the crystal animation? Was it like separate like object transforms, or was it bones, or was it like a vertex? Individual
standard
vertex?
rigid body transform animation. Yeah, just an animated FBX.
Okay,
So there was
so
no shader magic or vertex animation textures or anything like that. It's just the normal animation. Well, because they all have to have colliders, they all have to be physical. You need to be able to shoot it while it's growing and all that kind of stuff. So there was, it had to be a real sort of first-class citizen in terms of physics world and stuff. So it couldn't be some hackery. Yeah.
Thank you.
Do you have time for one more, Bojan? You can keep it to the break. Yeah?
But you can come and ask me later. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, Johannes.